The whiteout hit at 0400. Visibility died in seconds. Thermal turned to static. Night vision dissolved into white noise. Wind slammed across the ridge like a freight train of ice. Chief Daniels whispered into the radio, voice cracking under something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Defeat. It's over. We can't see. We can't move. We can't fight. 200 meters higher, Petty Officer Harper Raines pressed her gloved hand into the snow and listened. Not to the panic in Daniel's voice, not to the team's shallow breathing, but to the rhythm buried beneath the storm's roar. The others were blind, but she was starting to see. You're watching the Storyscape. If this story found you, drop your location in the comments. Let's see how far these legends travel. The whiteout hit at 0400. Not a snowstorm, an ambush. Visibility collapsed in seconds. Thermal feeds drowned in static. Night vision flared into blinding noise. Wind roared like a jet engine against the ridge, blasting snow sideways with enough force to sting through fabric and skin. One moment the team marched beneath a thin crescent moon. The next, the world became a spinning, suffocating vortex of white. Daniels pressed a gloved hand against his radio, voice tight. It's over. We can't see. We can't move. We can't fight. To anyone else on that ridge, he was right. But higher up the slope, 200 meters above the pinned seals, Petty Officer Harper Raines wasn't fighting the storm. She was reading it. You're watching the Storyscape. Drop your location in the comments. Let's see how far these stories travel. The mission had been sold to the team as clean and simple. Insert at 0200, move along a ridge, confirm presence of a hidden Taliban commander in a valley satellites couldn't map. Exfil before sunrise. Mother Nature never saw the plan. At 0400, she unleashed everything. Wind slammed down the ridge at 60 miles per hour, dragging ice crystals that cut like razors. The temperature plunged from -15 to -25 in minutes. The storm wasn't just weather. It felt deliberate, predatory, like the mountain wanted them gone. Porter cursed as his thermal scope turned to blinding white. Chen switched his NVGs off with a frustrated hiss. Useless. Daniels tried the radio again, voice steady despite the panic crawling at the edges. Ground team to Overwatch. We need exfil, immediate. The reply barely punched through the static. Negative. All aircraft are grounded. Storm's too violent. You're on your own until it passes. On their own. In -50 wind chill. With no cover. For 6 hours. Daniels clenched his jaw. They wouldn't survive 3. Chan crawled beside him, frostbite blooming across his cheeks. Chief, if we stay here, we die. Plain and simple. He was right. But there was nowhere to go. The ridge dropped off on both sides, steep and invisible under the swirling white. The valley below belonged to the enemy. Before Daniels could decide, Porter stiffened. Chief, I hear something. Everyone froze. At first, Harper thought it was the storm reshaping itself. But then, during a rare lull, she heard it too. Diesel engines, grinding, closing, men shouting in Pashto. Enemy patrol, Daniels breathed. The team tensed, rifles raised toward a world they couldn't see. Set perimeter. Harper, Overwatch. I need anything that gives us eyes. Copy. Harper crawled uphill, fighting wind that nearly rolled her back down. Her rifle dragged behind her through the drifts. She reached a boulder no bigger than a desk, but in this storm, it felt like a fortress. She pressed against it, heart steady despite the cold gnawing through every layer of clothing. She lifted her scope. Nothing. Just white static. But that wasn't where her vision came from. Storms had been her battlefield long before Afghanistan, Alaska, Norway, The Hindu Kush, every place where human senses failed and only instinct remained. While most snipers learned wind formulas and range estimates, Harper had learned something deeper. Storms have structure. Wind has architecture. Weather leaves signatures. She closed her eyes. Under the chaotic roar, she found the pattern, one steady current from the northwest, and beneath it, a faint counterflow. She imagined how terrain would bend that wind, how snowflakes move around hidden rock, how air density shifts before a break. She opened her eyes. There, 20 meters wide, the snow swirled differently. A small pocket where wind collided with a hidden outcrop, creating a micro-vortex. If visibility cracked open, even for a heartbeat, it would crack there first. She keyed her radio. "Chief, I have a potential break window. Northwest, 280 meters. Daniels hesitated. "We can't see our own hands, Harper. How are you—" "Trust me." Minutes crawled by. The team shivered violently, hypothermia setting in. Porter's teeth chattered uncontrollably. Daniels was losing sensation in his fingers. The storm was becoming a second enemy, and the first one was closing in. Metal clanked through the wind. Harper recognized it instantly. A PKM machine gun being mounted. Her stomach tightened. A PKM overlooking the ridge would end them in seconds. She pressed her cheek against the stock, relying entirely on instinct. The storm inhaled, drawing snow upward. Then it exhaled. A slit of visibility opened. Harper saw 4 men huddled around the weapon, sighting down toward the blinded SEALs. She didn't think, she acted. Years of firing in impossible conditions condensed into one reflex. Wind, severe left to right. Altitude, thin air. Temperature, low powder burn. Hold, 3 mils right, 1 up. Trigger. The storm slammed shut. 3 seconds later, a scream carried through the wind. Metal clattered against stone. Gun crew down, PKM disabled. Even through the storm, she felt the team below freeze in disbelief. "You made that shot?" Chen muttered over comms. "In this?" Harper didn't reply. She was already scanning again. But something about the wind changed. A tightening, a shift, a different tension in the air. She felt it before she heard it. The enemy was pulling back, not retreating, but reorganizing. They were making space.
"For what?" Daniels asked when she reported it. Harper's voice went flat. "For a sniper." As if summoned by the admission, a rifle cracked, stone exploding inches from her face. She rolled right on instinct, heart hammering. She pressed flat, breath fogging in broken bursts. "Chief," she whispered, "they have a shooter who can read the storm." Daniels cursed. "So what does that mean for us?" "It means," Harper steadied her rifle, eyes scanning the white void. "This isn't a firefight anymore." Snow shifted around her, wind pressing across her hood like a warning hand. "This is a duel. 2 hunters, 2 ghosts, 1 storm, 1 mistake from death." Harper lowered her breathing, matched it to the pulse of the wind, and began listening for the next whisper of the mountain. The duel had already begun. Harper moved like a shadow slipping between currents of the storm. She found a rocky outcropping overlooking the narrow ridge trail the enemy vehicles were climbing. Wind roared past her, pulling at her gear, but she forced her breathing steady. The storm wasn't a threat to her. It was armor, camouflage, and opportunity. Below, the SEALs struggled through waist-deep snow, dragging Porter between them. Even from distance, Harper could hear the exhaustion in their movements, the desperate urgency in every step. She didn't have time to feel anything about leaving them. She only had time to make sure they lived. Engines echoed again, closer, louder, vibrating through the rock beneath their elbows. Then, shapes materialized through the white, hulking and monstrous. A technical truck crawling up the ridge, its heavy machine gun mounted in the back. Fighters crammed into the bed, another vehicle behind it, another engine growling somewhere deeper in the storm. Harper checked her ammo. 1 partial mag. 2 full mags. 55 rounds total. Not enough for what was coming. She adjusted her angle. The vehicles were moving in a tight column. Disabling the lead would choke the entire trail. She didn't need to kill everyone. She just needed to stop them long enough. She waited for the storm to breathe. The first compression zone opened like a shutter. Harper fired 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Smooth, mechanical, precise. The first round punched through the radiator. Steam exploded upward. Second round tore into the engine block. Third cracked the axle. The vehicle lurched violently and died. The trail bottlenecked instantly as the vehicles behind it braked hard, their drivers shouting in confusion. The fighters spilled from the back of the truck, weapons raised, blinded by the whiteout. They fired into nothing. Harper was already 30 meters away, repositioning. Fear spread through the fighters like a spark on dry brush. She heard it. Panic in their voices, the rapid fire of arguments in Pashto. They couldn't see her. They didn't know where the shots came from. To them, she was exactly what their commanders had whispered about on encrypted channels. A ghost in the storm. Another break. Harper fired twice.
2 fighters collapsed into the snow. The rest ducked behind the disabled truck, shouting for the unseen gunner to reveal themselves. But she wasn't there anymore. She moved again, 40 meters this time, to a narrow cut in the ridge. Her fingers burned from cold despite gloves. Her cheek felt dead where frostbite was setting in. Her vision pulsed at the edges from exhaustion. No matter. She settled behind another rock, steadying the rifle. Her radio crackled. Daniel's voice strained. "Harper, status. Mobile. Engaged. How far are you?" "We found a cave, sheltering Porter. He's alive but slipping. I'll keep them pinned 15 minutes. She didn't know if she could buy them 15 minutes, but she would die trying. Below her, fighters reorganized. A few tried to flank along the steep right drop, slipping and sliding on the icy edge. Harper waited until a gust thinned the storm, then fired once. Clean, precise. The flanking attempt collapsed instantly. Panic grew. Movement slowed. Confidence died. Harper moved again. Her toes were numb, fingers shaking now, but her breathing stayed steady, forced calm through sheer discipline. She had done cold weather operations before. None like this, but enough that her mind could separate panic from action. Then she heard something new, an engine turning over sharply from the second vehicle, a different pitch, lower, heavier. They were trying to reverse, backing down the ridge. They wanted to regroup and come again with reinforcements. Harper couldn't let them. She sprinted through knee-deep snow towards a new vantage point, legs screaming with each plunge. The storm pushed sideways, threatening to topple her. Her rifle dragged behind her in her hand like dead weight, until she slid behind another rock. Another break. She fired at the reversing vehicle's front tire. The round struck true, blowing the tire into shreds. The vehicle jerked, skidding sideways, nearly sliding off the ridge before its rear wheels caught the rock. Fighters inside shouted in terror. Harper fired again, striking the rear wheel. The pitch pitched deeper toward the drop. Another shot. The entire mass of steel shifted, lost traction, and tumbled off the ridge. Metal screamed as it rolled down the slope, disappearing into the white abyss. For several seconds, everything went quiet. The fighters who remained seemed paralyzed, frozen not by cold, but by fear. Harper moved again. She didn't stay in one place long enough for them to guess her. They fired wildly, bullets cracking overhead, sparking off stone where she used to be. Shouts filled the storm, frantic, Uneven. They were unraveling. Good. But she knew she couldn't fight forever. She was slowing. Her muscles trembled uncontrollably from the cold. The storm itself was draining her strength. This mountain wanted her dead as much as the fighters did. A voice rose through the wind, angry, commanding, deeper than the others. One fighter shouting orders, rallying the group. They were pushing again, forming a line to sweep the ridge. Harper steadied the rifle, breath shaking. She had to break their momentum again fast.
A break opened. Shot. 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 One dropped. Another stumbled, fell. A third cried out. The line collapsed instantly. Harper pushed to her feet, every limb screaming, and moved again. Her world shrank to the rhythm of the storm, the weight of her rifle, the simple pulse of inhale, exhale, trigger. 5 minutes passed, then 8, then 10. The fighters finally broke. Engines roared, the remaining vehicle reversing hard, fleeing down the ridge. Men climbed aboard as it pulled away, abandoning the disabled truck, abandoning their dead, abandoning the fight. Harper sagged behind the rocks, chest heaving, vision pulsing black at the edges. She had done it. Alone. She had held them off. The storm remained merciless, but the ridge was now silent except for the wind. She keyed her radio. "Chief, they're retreating. Ridge is clear. Harper, get back to us, now." She forced herself upright and began descending the ridge toward the team's trail, legs burning with each step. Snow tried to swallow her. Wind tried to throw her aside. She carried her rifle like a lifeline. The storm began to ease just enough to reveal faint shapes ahead. Disturbed snow from boots dragging Porter toward safety. She followed it, step by step, vision blurred, limbs stiffening. 40 minutes passed, felt like 4 hours. Finally, a black opening appeared through the white, the mouth of a cave. Daniel stood at the entrance, silhouetted against the flicker of a small fire inside. When Harper stepped into view, he stared, relief hitting him like a physical blow. She stumbled the last few feet, collapsing into the cave. Chen grabbed her under the arms, guiding her toward the fire as snow melted off her shoulders in sheets. Daniels knelt in front of her, eyes full of something between shock and reverence. "What you just did," he whispered. "No manual covers it. No training prepares for it. You bought us our lives." Harper just breathed, slow, shaking, exhausted beyond words. "We survived together," she finally murmured. "Yeah, but today you carried all of us." Porter was alive, the team was alive, and the storm, finally, was beginning to break. The cave was barely large enough for 6 exhausted SEALs, 1 dying storm, and a fading ember of hope. Snow had walled up half the entrance, leaving a narrow mouth open to the wind, which still hissed like a predator, unwilling to admit defeat. Inside, the fire burned low, just a handful of glowing tabs, flickering fragile warmth across pale, frost-bitten faces. Porter lay closest to the flames, wrapped in emergency blankets. His lips had regained faint color, and the uncontrollable shivering had slowed. It wasn't victory yet, but it was movement in the right direction. Chan monitored him, one hand constantly checking pulse, the other shielding his face from drafts. Harper sat against the back wall, her hands hovering above the fire. Pain surged through her fingers each time warmth touched them, nerves screaming awake like she'd plunged her hands into broken glass. She welcomed it. Pain meant blood was flowing again. Pain meant her hands were still usable, still capable of holding a rifle. Daniels watched her silently across the fire.
He'd known operators who cracked after a simple dust storm, who lost composure after a few hours in the cold. But Harper, even after the duel, after holding off a force 3 times their size, after a sniper nearly removed her head, she looked steady. Frostbitten, exhausted, but steady. Her eyes were too sharp for someone who should barely be conscious. She felt his gaze. "Say it." "You're not human," Daniels muttered. "Not today," Grant added, rubbing his own frozen arms. "Today you are something else." Harper didn't respond. Compliments meant nothing when adrenaline was still fading out of her bloodstream. All that mattered now was the next step. Survival wasn't over, not until they were airborne. "Storm's weakening," Harper said quietly, tilting her head toward the cave entrance. Chen frowned. "You hear something?" "Feel something," she nodded toward the wind. "Pitch is dropping. Gust intervals expanding. Pressure shifting." Silence. None of them questioned her, not after what they'd seen her do. Minutes turned to an hour, then 2. They rotated positions, huddling close to the fire whenever their limbs went too numb, checking Porter's breathing, listening for anything that might signal the enemy regrouping. But there was nothing, only wind dying in slow surrender. At last, Harper pushed herself to her feet. Her legs protested, stiff and heavy, but she braced against the wall and stepped toward the entrance. Daniel stood beside her. Moment of truth. Together, they kicked away chunks of snow, breaking open a wider slit into the outside world, and for the first time in hours, they could see. The world outside glowed white and silver, immaculate under the early light. The ridge was blanketed in fresh snow, soft and smooth except for the carved-out trail their boots had made earlier. The air was still bitterly cold, but the gale-force winds had dropped to something survivable. Above them, the clouds had cracked. Patches of stark blue sky stared down, cold and perfect. Harper inhaled deeply. The air was still razor-sharp, but it was clean, clear, predictable again. Then she heard it, a faint, rhythmic thumping, far away, barely audible. Rotor blades. "Bird inbound," she said. "How the hell can you—" Grant began, and then he heard it too. The team stepped out into the blinding light, shielding their eyes as the helicopter crested the far ridge, nose dipping as it fought thin mountain air. The pilot held steady, searching for the landing point Harper had marked in the early briefing. Daniels radioed coordinates, voice sharp and direct. The helicopter angled down, snow kicked up in spirals as its skids hit the ridge, bouncing once before settling.
The crew chief leaned out. "Let's go! Move!" Chan and Grant carried Porter in a makeshift sling. The others hauled gear, whatever hadn't frozen solid. Harper took the rear, scanning the ridge, the valley, the horizon. She didn't expect the enemies to return so soon, but she'd been wrong before. Once. She wasn't planning on being wrong twice. Daniels climbed in. The rest followed. Harper stopped at the ramp, turning back for a final look at the ridge that nearly claimed them. The broken truck down the slope, their footprints half swallowed by snow, scattered shell casings already icing over. The raw white trail where she'd fought alone, wind screaming around her like the mountain's own voice. The place where she killed the ghost that could have been her twin. Then she stepped inside. The ramp lifted, the helicopter surged upward, and the ridge, the valley, the storm, all of it shrank into distance. They had won. But the mountain didn't applaud. It simply let them go. Back at the FOB, life resumed in fast forward. Medics rushed Porter into treatment for severe cold exposure. They stripped the team of their gear, assessing frostbite, dehydration, nerve damage.
Harper barely felt the hands lifting her arms or turning her palms over. She only felt the absence of the storm's rhythm, the silence of normal weather, the uncomfortable weight of stillness. She slept for 16 hours straight. When she woke, sunlight cut through the window, warm, almost insulting compared to the white chaos she'd survived. Her throat burned, her skin felt cracked, but she breathed easily. She was alive. Porter was stable. They told her he'd need weeks of recovery, but would likely keep all his fingers, thanks to how fast the team got him warm, thanks to how long she bought them. Then came the debrief. A small room, dim lights, a table too clean to belong to anyone who'd ever seen combat. A Navy captain with crisp uniform creases sat across from her, flipping through pages of typed reports. He read out loud the highlights: her impossible PKM shot, the sniper duel, the stand on the ridge, the destroyed vehicles, the enemy retreating into panic, the team's survival. Your actions were the primary factor in the survival of all 6 operators. Harper looked at her gloves resting on the table. We survived because we stayed together. He tapped the folder. That's not what this says. He opened a classified report. Intercepted Taliban chatter describes you as a woman who shoots through storms and reads the wind like scripture. They call you the ghost in the storm. Harper didn't smile, but something in her eyes sharpened, an acknowledgement. If fear kept enemies away from mountains like that, fear was a tool. The captain continued. You are being put forward for a Bronze Star with Valor, but that's not the big one. He slid a new folder across the table. This is a DevGru Selection Pathway packet. SEAL Team 6. Harper didn't reach for it. You're one of the few operators in the last decade to receive this invitation without requesting it. Your performance wasn't just impressive, it was elite beyond quantification. Harper finally met his eyes. Sir, I'm not leaving my team. You'd rather turn down a Tier 1 slot? I'd rather not abandon the people who survived a mountain with me. The captain studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The door stays open, permanently. Later, she stepped outside into the Afghan sun, which felt too hot compared to the cold she'd mastered. Dust swirled in the wind, an entirely different kind of storm. Helicopters landed and lifted constantly. Vehicles rumbled across gravel. The world kept moving. She found Daniels near the motor pool, inspecting gear. Chief, he looked up. His frostbite scars were still raw. You look alive. Still here, she said. You? Barely. He paused. They offered you DevGru. I nodded. You said no? Daniels stared, then laughed under his breath. You're unbelievable. They need me. All of them. You know that. Yeah, I do. There was a long silence, not awkward, earned. They scared the hell out of you, you know. The enemy, our guys, everyone. I wasn't trying to. You did anyway. Her gaze drifted upward toward the distant snowy peaks. The storm made me. No, Daniel said. You mastered it. That night, Harper sat on her bunk, disassembling her rifle piece by piece. Cleaning it was a ceremony, meditative, grounding. Every patch through the barrel carried away a memory. The PKM shot, the duel, the blind firing line on the ridge, the fear she refused to acknowledge. She thought of the enemy sniper, the one who nearly matched her breath for breath, wind for wind, moment for moment. He could have killed her. She could have killed him. Only one walked away. Harper reassembled her rifle, clicked the magazine in, and placed it beside her pillow. Tomorrow there would be another mission, another valley, another mountain, maybe another storm. If there was, she'd be ready. Because the storm wasn't just an enemy to her, it was her domain, her weapon, her camouflage, her signature. She didn't move through the storm, she moved with it. And when the world went white, when radios failed, when eyes went blind, when men whispered that it was over, that was when she became exactly who she was meant to be, the ghost in the storm. The one hunter the weather could not hide, the one presence the mountain could not kill, the one force the enemy could not understand until it was already too late. Harper lay down, breath steady, eyes closing at last. Whatever came next, she would meet it in the wind.